have cave paintings dating back 40,000 years.
How do you know they're 40,000 years old?
Radiometric dating.
Do you know about the problems with radiometric dating?
Please explain.
Okay. Well, for example, since the material, your dating can only be performed, is only performed, I should say, on igneous rocks, not sedimentary ones. The materials, the rock, the sedimentary rock, that in which you find the an igneous rock that you want to date, was deposited by moving water. You don't know when that rock was actually sealed in that sedimentary strata, so you can pull it out and date it. You don't know when. Firstly, so you don't know when that rock became into its particular location for the dating process to have begun then. Oh on top of that, since water washes radioisotopes into and out of rocks, which is why we have lead and uranium and stuff in our drinking water, which is a bad thing. So if you date a rock that's 10 meters below the surface of the Earth, and let's say you get 10 million years of age with radiometric dating, and then you date a rock that's 50 feet down, and you get 150 million years old, and you say, the one at the bottom is older because of the geologic column's age. It's older because it's deeper. That's the paradigm, right? So, but here's the thing: you don't know how much of the isotopes were in the rock at the top that got washed out, ended up in the rocks below. You don't have a way of knowing that unless you know every single drop of water that's hit that rock over its age. And the older you think that rock is, the greater the problem is. You don't have any clue as to how much of that isotope was washed out of the rocks at the top and deposited into the ones at the bottom, which is why your radiometric dating process says the one at the bottom is older and the one at the top is younger.
And also regarding those paintings or etchings and carvings in rock, in a cave or cliff face or what have you, you're testing the rock. You're not testing the material, the tools that were used. So therefore, your radiometric dating is testing a decay of radioactive material.
That's right.
Based on the material that was written on.
Is my mic on? Is it on?
Yeah, it's on. Remy is right. You're testing the rock, not the painting itself.
Do you guys know what ochre is?
Yeah, was it a root that it's ground into a pulp?
No, it's the rock that the Aboriginals ground down to make the dye that went on the rocks. Okay, so that's what they're testing.
Not necessarily.
And it has constituents of it that are crystallized. And what they do is they measure the daughter atoms that have decayed from the parent atoms, and they get a general idea of how long this has been there.
Okay, so you're testing the age of the rock that they used and
the ochre
compounded it. Yeah. So again, you're not capable of testing when it was written with. You're only testing the age of when that mineral that they mashed into dust and it mixed with water was originally formed. Or was changed from whatever mineral it came from. You are not actually testing when those people said, okay, if I smash this rock into a dust for 2 days straight, and then I mix it with water and another ingredient to make it malleable so I can apply it to the wall, you're not testing when that was capable. You're testing how old that mineral that was mashed into a dust changed from whatever it was before.
Ramirez. So what you're saying is when they turn this into an ochre, it actually changes the age of the rock.
No, I didn't say that.
To make an ochre.
I didn't say that. I'm saying what the mineral was before they turned it into that. So it was say I use clay right now, and I've made a sculpture out of it. Oh, that sculpture is 50,000. I just made that yesterday.
No, the clay that you made the sculpture.
You're not testing me. You're not testing my hands, my sweat, the things I ate to say, hey, that was built, that was formed and molded in 2020. You're testing. Oh no, that clay was found over in the hills in Canada here.
Yeah.
And that clay is dated 40,000 years old. You're not dating
exactly.
me. So exactly, you can't say that culture wrote on those walls 40,000 years ago.
But and there's so many discrepancies in these dating methods, especially the radiocarbon dating method has been so thoroughly falsified. I mean, scientists have shown that there exists carbon in fossils, in strata that the evolutionists date to tens of millions of years old. And not to mention diamonds. Brother Neff talks about this often. Diamonds, as we know, they're the hardest substance on Earth, and therefore its interior should be 100% resistant to contamination.
Absolutely.
That means, and because evolutionists will often say when you point to carbon in fossils, for example, oh, you know.
You mean geologists, don't you? You mean geologists, not
So
evolutionists.
geologists, let's say geologists, they'll look to contamination as what I call a rescue device. But if you look to diamonds, they're the hardest substance on Earth. Therefore, they're extremely resistant to contamination. That means the carbon-14 found in the diamonds, it had to have been there from the beginning. And
so you're saying the diamonds are 6,000 years old?
Of course, because carbon dating has a maximum age reliancy of about 100,000 years. Therefore, the evolutionists say that these diamonds are billions of years old, and yet we find carbon-14 in a number of samples of not only diamonds, but also in coal, fossilized wood. And real quick. And these were all, for example, Dr. John Baumgartner detected carbon-14 in these samples. And these samples were taken from layers that geologists date to tens of millions of years old. How do you explain that one? I mean, that's crazy.
That's a great point, brother.
Would you carbon date a fossil?
Knowledgeable fellow, and he's giving you some.
Would you carbon date a fossil? Would you carbon date a fossil?
Well, no, of course not. But if you find carbon in it, the point Standing for Truth is making.
You find carbon in fossils.
The point Standing for Truth is making is diamond being the hardest substance in the Earth is diamond because the molecules of the carbon atoms are aligned in a pattern, layers one on top of the other, so utterly tightly that nothing gets into a diamond except light. Nothing.
And that's why we use it for
carbon
dating.
A diamond, because
that's
carbon
why we use it for carbon dating.
Carbon is a tiny atom, and when you pack the atoms so tightly in together like that, then nothing can get between them. So nothing can enter into a diamond. Nothing except light. Nothing. So if there's carbon-14 inside a diamond, it had to have been in the original carbon that was formed into a diamond because it can't get in there.
That's my point. So the question becomes, if radiocarbon, as we know, this is basic, lasts only a few 100,000 years, why is it found in all the Earth's diamonds that are dated by the geologists to billions of years old? That's the question that the uniformitarian needs to be asking themselves.
What were diamonds before they were diamonds?
Well, we know that. What's that? Well, we know that diamonds require very high pressure to form, and this pressure is found deep below the surface of the Earth. So that's where the diamonds are supposedly to have formed. Yeah.
And what are diamonds made out of? Your pressure. What makes a diamond?
Are you trying to say that the carbon was locked in there at the formation of the diamonds billions of years ago, and they haven't been able to dissipate into the atmosphere? Is what you're saying?
I'm saying, like, before a diamond is a diamond, what is it?
Carbon.
Oh my God!
You're not understanding. Standing for Truth. See if you can get through his skull.
Come on!
I'll say it with really small words. No, real quick. If radiocarbon lasts only a few 100,000 years,
I was being pejorative. I apologize. I apologize.
That's okay.
I was being sorry, Neff.
Okay. But
I
you
want to make one
see the
point,
problem, don't you? That if the carbon-14 can't get into the diamond, and if it has a half-life of 5,760 or so years, and it would not possibly be any carbon-14 in a diamond that's 1 million much years old, much less a billion. And most geologists claim diamonds are roughly a billion or more years old.
But
there can't be any contamination either, because these
why?
radiocarbon well, I'm telling you why. It's because of these radiocarbon laboratories. They have subjected these samples that are sent to them regarding diamonds before they actually date them. Okay, before they look for the carbon-14, they are subjected to extremely brutal treatments. They use strong acids, they use bleaches to rid them of all the contaminations. So then the instruments are tested on them with blank samples, but yet the carbon-14 is still found in the diamonds. But the whole point is radiocarbon only lasts a few 100,000 years, as Brother Neff explained, and yet we find carbon in samples of all sorts of things that are told by the uniformitarians to us that they're billions of years old.
Are you happy? Are you happy to say that you can accurately date stuff with carbon-14 dating, or you just say no, it won't work?
No, well, the dates that are derived would be relative.
It's contradictory, actually, and it's actually a stumbling block for carbon dating because the earliest carbon life on Earth was 470 million years ago, if we go according to evolution, and so therefore the half-life, the full life going backwards would be carbon 28. 900 million years ago. So therefore, you're now saying that carbon-14 is wrong. It's actually longer that you can date things. Funny. And how is it? How is that possible? If we can't even get certain fossils correct, and unless they go by the geological column.
You understand there's other dating methods and.
Right. And that's a point I wanted to make about the other dating methods. So, for example, you can look at uranium to lead. You can look at the radioisotope dating methods, potassium to argon. But I'm not sure if you're familiar with the rate scientists. RATE, R-A-T-E, stands for radioisotopes in the age of the Earth. What they did, this consisted of a number of PhD geologists, geophysicists, for example, Dr. Andrew Snelling, Dr. Baumgartner, Dr. Humphreys. I mean, these are not just Joe Schmo. They know what they're talking about. So what they did was they took...
I beg to differ, but continue.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So, well, are you familiar with who Dr. John Baumgartner is? I mean, he's one of the most renowned geophysicists. So
yeah.
Just Google his name and you can see how many... published papers he has versus how many published papers you have, but that's besides the point. So those rate scientists, what they did was they took rock samples from the same rock layers, okay? They subjected them to the dating methods all at once. Now, what did they find? Okay, so they found different results for the different dating methods, and this even includes the most praised isochron dating, which, and this is all fresh in my mind because I just debated conspiracy cats on this last night. So this means that there are tremendous windows of error for every single dating method, including isochron. Now, what's funny is the rate scientists went into this project predicting these things. They predicted that they'd find evidence in the rocks for accelerated nuclear decay, and that's exactly what they found. So they had these rocks, and they actually looked at, and Brother Neff can speak to this as well, that they looked to newly formed rocks from recent volcanic eruptions that came back as millions to billions of years old. So why would we trust these methods if we're getting dates in error of rocks of known age, but yet the uniformitarians want us to believe the dates derive from rocks of unknown age?
Exactly.
No. Oh, look, guys, hang on, wait. There's a lot of you and one of me. Can I just make a point?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, take your time.
So let's just say, are we all in agreement that you think the Earth is only 6,000 years old?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Yes. Yeah.
It's
So
easily proven.
when a daughter molecule separates from the parent molecule, is there a release of energy?
Yes.
Of course.
That happens in radiation and like lots of bad radiation and all that sort of stuff. So how did all those daughter molecules separate without turning the world into a molten mass of radioactivity?
Here's one way.
Yeah, I
For
can
the
give a
same
number here.
reason you have water in your car's engine and it doesn't seize up.
Right. And all of the numbers of lines of evidence that would indicate that radioisotope decay was accelerated in the past, for example, like helium, fission tracks, radio halos. Now, your question is there'd be too much heat produced from all the
And
energy.
radioactivity.
And radioactivity. So, as Neff said, but also the massive amounts of water that was actually on the earth at the time of the flood would shield Noah from the excess heat and the radiation and the animals on the ark. So if you have a mile or more of water, well, we have examples today. We use water in nuclear reactors today to protect and to shield things. Therefore, okay, go ahead.
So you're saying that the radioactivity just sped up at the flood?
I would say because of the effects of the flood, for example, catastrophic plate tectonics, meters per second, plate movement, subduction, friction, runaway subduction would produce enough havoc in the earth to accelerate nuclear decay. And that's what these rate scientists predicted. And that's what they found directly in the rocks. So typically the critics will respond with, well, that would produce too much heat. But Neff and I are trying to explain to you that amount of water would not only shield radiation, but it would also take up much of the heat. But most importantly, there's a lot of evidence suggesting that at the breaking up of the fountains of the Great Deep, you can read that directly in Genesis, that would have actually involved supersonic steam jets, which would have taken up most of the heat into space. And we know space can much of that have more problems.
That is a big can of worms.
So let me explain a little bit more about what Standing for Truth is talking about. What you see on the screen, I'm sharing now. I should be able to see it. No, it's not showing. Yeah, it is. So this is the rate team. These are the scientists that conducted this experiment. And what they did was they went around to various locations. It cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this. They went to various locations on the earth and they collected samples of granite. And then they went back to the laboratories with them, and they arduously and very diligently removed the little granules of rock, I forgot the name of it.
Crystal?
The zircon crystals from the granite, which is a very arduous, time consuming process. Took a lot of man hours of work, and they collected these little bitty granules of zircon from the granite, and they sent this collection of zircons to a secular laboratory, and they said, what we want to do is find out how much helium is trapped inside these zircons. And so the laboratory measured the amount of helium in the zircon crystals and sent their report back. Then they sent in another request with more samples saying, here's what we want to know. We want to know the rate at which the helium escapes from the zircon. And the lab conducted their study. They measured how much helium was in it, then over a period of time, and how much now was in it. And they did this and they came up with a rate. They said, this is the rate at which helium escapes from zircon crystals. Now, if you do the mathematics, you take the rate plus by how much is in the rocks, and you know what? It comes out to precisely 6,000 years old.
Right. And that was a prediction by Dr. Humphreys. That was confirmed. And that's what science is all about, testable and falsifiable prediction.
Big time.
Well,
so what you're saying is that the creation happened regardless of any other sort of position that like other scientists.
I think before any of that, the question that Neff would be asking you regarding the helium, since we know that helium diffuses so rapidly that all the helium should have leaked out in less than 100,000 years is what the uniformitarians and the geologists will admit to. Why were these rocks that they tested, the zircon crystals?
Out of these sealed zircon crystals?
So your explanation for why there's still so much helium in all of these rocks is because the helium's been sealed in? No, because helium's so slippery.
No, that
So
doesn't work.
slippery. It should have
Why?
dissipated.
Helium
Wait.
is a very
I'm
tiny
not a
atom.
geologist. I'm asking questions.
Well, we're explaining. Helium is a really tiny atom, and therefore it's called slippery, and it slips out. It works its way out of whatever material it's in very easily, and it comes. Okay, so it can't stay trapped for very long inside any rock. It works its way out between the gaps in the granules of the rock, and they measure the rate of which at which it does so. And
so these zircon crystals, it can get out of those, or what?
Right. The helium in the zircon crystals should have leaked out in less than 100,000 years. So the prediction by the rate team was, okay, let's take these zircon crystals and subject them to tests and see if there's any helium left in them. And as Neff pointed out, these pre-flood rocks have an average diffusion rate of only about 6,000 years, which is consistent with the young Earth creation model. Why is there so much helium in the oldest rocks? I think some were even taken from, I'll double check, the papers are technical and lengthy, but I believe Humphreys talks about, he took some of the rocks from even the Cambrian and Precambrian, as old as it gets, and yet there's still helium. It should have leaked out. How come it hasn't?
Right. Yeah,
so let's wait. Okay, I can dig that all you guys have problems with. Yeah,
can I add something to the conversation?
Yeah.
Hey, brother George.
How are you standing?
Nice to meet you, George.
No worries, mate. I think we've spoken before. I think it's Tony, isn't it? Yeah,
That's
Tony.
correct.
On the issue of carbon-14 in diamonds, the only way that carbon-14 can actually come about in the diamonds is through uranium neutron flow into free nitrogen. Here's the problem, though. Uranium decays at a rate of 4.5 billion. That's the half-life, 4.5 billion years, whereas the decay in carbon-14 is 5,730 years. That means the carbon-14 is actually decaying at 800,000 times faster than the uranium can actually make the carbon-14. Even if it was able to do it, it would add 0.001 percentage modern carbon into that diamond. That is negligible, mate. That is negligible. There is no solution from a secular point of view on the carbon-14 in the diamond. Absolutely none. That is probably the best evidence for a young Earth there is.
So what you all are saying is that basically the creation happened and the Earth is only 6,000 years old.
That's right. Yes. That's what we believe, and that we have a really strong scientific reason for believing it from multiple fields of science.
I think one of the major failings of creationism is that you cannot prove your point without mentioning evolution, geology, any other field. You have to pick holes in every other field.
That's not true. I can show scientific evidence the Earth is young without mentioning the idea that the Earth is millions of years old.
Tony, I just did, mate. I never mentioned evolution once in the carbon-14 issue in the diamond.
No, I get it. But I'm sure some eminent geologists and all that would have issue with what you've said.
No, you name one. I've researched this fairly well. I've even spoken to Dr. Baumgartner. No one has got a solution. No secular scientist of any sort has got a solution to the carbon-14 in the diamond. None whatsoever.
Right.
If you can find one, show it to me.
And then I want to point out, too, that the gold standard of science is making testable and falsifiable predictions. Therefore, these rate scientists, highly qualified PhD geologists, geophysicists, they made these predictions going into their project, which lasted years. So, I mean, it wasn't guaranteed that they'd find all of this data regarding the helium, regarding the different isochron dates from the same rock layer. So, I mean, that's science, you'd agree, I imagine.
But what predictions and testable facts does creationism give us?
Oh boy, don't get us started on
How
that.
long do you, how long do you
Talk for an
have?
hour. Yeah.
You might as well sit back because we're going to be at this for a long time.
Just give me
You
a
can start
method.
with mitochondrial Eve, Y chromosome
No,
Adam.
why are you
Brother
talking
Neff,
about
you
that?
can
What?
start with something.
Well, I
Magnetic
just want to
fields.
first, before we talk about that, I want to share with you one of the most astonishing photographs I think I've ever seen. You see this? This is, I believe, in Yosemite Park. I'm not sure; it may not be, but what you see here is a giant hole in the side of a mountain.
Mm.
That's called the impact mark. That's like, imagine you had a wall of clay, and you took a big rock and you threw it hard as you could and hit the wall, and it breaks away in layers like that. You can see what would happen. Well, that's a hole in the side of a mountain. Now look at the trees in the foreground. You can see the scale of that hole in the side of that mountain. What could make a hole in the side of a mountain that impacts a mountain that big, moving that far, that fast, that would hit a mountain and leave a hole in it? What happened? Did Zeus pick up a rock, and get mad at somebody, throw it, right? What happened? How did that rock impact that mountain at
Can I answer now, or
that hard?
do you want to continue?
I'll tell you what I think happened, and you can tell us what you think happened. Here's what I think happened. I think at the end of the Noahic flood, as the waters were receding from the continents, the mountains had already been raised, and a giant sheet flow of water moving at 180 or more miles per hour was carrying massive amounts of boulders and rocks with it in it of all sizes. And one of those rocks weighed about 150 tons and was moving at 180 miles an hour and hit the side of that mountain. Boom! That's what I believe happened.
Tony, I'll
Are
give
you all
you.
guys? Yeah. Are
I'll
you
give- I'll give-
all
I'll
in
give you-
Maybe we should let
favour of
Tony
that, or
respond.
Okay.
are you all in favour of that, or that sounds fairly reasonable?
Yes.
News to me.
These are percussion marks in rocks. They're all over the world. Rocks everywhere show percussion marks. That's where a rock slammed into another rock.
Can
Some-
I answer
some
the
rocks-
Yosemite?
Yes, some rocks that have percussion marks are absolutely massive boulders, and some are very small, like this one. You can see these percussion marks. To make a percussion mark like that, the rock has to be moving at high speed, not 20 miles an hour, not 40, not 50, more like 100 to 200 miles an hour.
Like shot out of a volcano.
Kind of. See this rock here? There's an ink pen. That rock weighs probably 18 or 20 pounds or 30 pounds. And it just hits another rock so hard that it literally smacked off part of that rock. So how did it happen? The creationist explanation is, in the end stage of the flood, water was flowing off the continents in every direction in massive sheet flows that accelerated and accelerated and accelerated. And these sheets of water were moving at very high speed, and they were very deep, anywhere from 30 to 350 feet deep. And they were moving at very high speed, and they were literally taking billions of tons of rocks and trees, dead animals and everything, and slamming things every which way and rolling and smashing. And that's why you have so much rounded rock on the earth today, is because the waters of the flood did it.
So
That's the explanation from the creation.
Why don't we find any fossilized wagons?
Wagons.
Yeah, wagons.
Well, I don't. Let's look at look at it this way. On the Earth, there may have been up to maybe 2 million people living on the Earth.
Is anybody going to answer
flood.
this, or are you
And
just going to avoid
I
me?
think the odds of finding one is like digging for a needle in a field of haystacks.
Did people not have wagons?
Yes, and I think the odds of finding
How
one
many-
is like
how many
looking for a
people
needle
had
in a
wagons?
field of haystacks.
Were there rabbits?
Well, why haven't we found a ray? If evolution is true, why haven't we found a
Why are you avoiding
not?
my question? Were there rabbits?
I would say that the reason why we don't find a heck of a lot of just even humans, let alone wagons, is because
big time. Because every human got crunched.
Okay, go ahead, and then I'll answer. Yeah, go ahead.
Every human on the earth, except for 8 people, got put into the earth. Why do we not find those
Right.
fossils?
So my answer, for the most part, and I think there are some areas in the earth where we could point, like the Ashley phosphate bed and whatnot. But I mean, the rule is, you don't find too many. The rule is you don't find too many humans in the fossil record from the flood. Now, the reason why is because if we read in Genesis, it tells us that God created two people, Adam and Eve, but an earth full of animal kinds, creatures, populations of all sorts of animals. So you're looking at millions of creatures versus two people right off the bat. By the time you reach the flood, and for the most part, humans were probably all living close to each other for the most part, while the animals were spread out all over the earth. Therefore, we would expect to find billions and billions of fossils of animals and only very limited of humans, if any, as Brother Neff pointed out. And that's exactly what we find. So I'm happy with that.
Well, also
Oh
consider
my
this: is
God.
humans have been around for 150,000 years or more as the evolutionists.
Right.
Where
We're
are
all
all the
humans.
graves? Where are all the graves? For 150,000 years, people were dying and burying each other.
Yeah.
Where's all the graves?
Yeah.
Mm.
Good question.
Oh, yeah. Like, exactly. I'll build off
Answer
of
that question, Tony. That's a good question.
I addressed that before years ago when I was on Neff's channel. At a sustaining rate of increasing population, you have to have 3 or more children per family. So 150 to 200,000 years. By today, if you continue with Homo sapien, 200,000 years ago, you should have well over 100 billion people alive today, regardless of how many catastrophes happen.
Oh, sorry.
Right.
Sorry.
Mathematics shows that the Earth is young because, as Remy is pointing out, if mankind had existed for hundreds of thousands, 100,000 years, there would be billions times billions.
No.
Yeah.
Okay,
Tony,
let's give Tony a chance to respond. How do you answer these
Go ahead.
questions regarding all the humans that should be found? Even we could just look at species today, for example. I mean, if you look at bird species alive today, there's only between 10 and 12,000 bird species. Look that up on Google, okay? That, according to our model, 4,500 years ago, you got a handful of bird kinds that come off the ark and start speciating. That's only between 2 and 3 a year for 4,500 years. That matches up perfectly. Evolutionists say that birds evolved from theropod-like dinosaurs 65 million years ago. Why are there so few bird species today? There should be 500,000 bird species. How do you account? And we could go into lizards. We can go into snakes. I'm just focusing cats, dogs. I'm just focusing on birds for now. How do you explain the discrepancies there? Tony, since you hold to deep time evolution, go ahead.
Because species are subject to their environment. Okay, if the food runs out, they die.
Rescue device.
Okay. So let's account then for extinction events. For example, that was a pretty poor answer.
No, I wasn't talking about extinction events. I was not talking about it. What?
Why are there so few species today if deep time evolution is true? We just seen last year a paper came out, new species of bird, a new species of finch on the Galapagos Islands, for example, was observed. We have creation scientists, for example, a Harvard graduate named Dr. Nathaniel Jensen. He's got in print many testable predictions on speciation events based on speciation since the flood 4,500 years ago. He made a specific one on birds. Lo and behold, a year later, we have a technical paper coming out that's showing us a new bird species today before our very own eyes. And we're studying the Galapagos Islands. So,
what did you just say?
New bird species.
You accept speciation.
Yeah, speciation doesn't cause anatomical change. Speciation doesn't cause anatomical change.
Speciation, and it's typically a reduction in genetic variability. Like in this paper, when you read it, the finch species lost. Well, real quick. Oh yeah. For example, speciation events often occur from shifts in heterozygosity, which is more of a variation, to shifts in homozygosity. That's a reduction in genetic information. That's opposite of what is required for fish to fisherman evolution to be true. But I don't want you to dodge around. I just want an answer.
Right. I can dig it. Look, guys,
Why so
I'm
few
the-
bird species? Well, just and take your time. I just want an answer to that. I'm not going to interrupt.
You need an answer to that. Okay, but I'm going to answer that. But
Go ahead. Yeah, take your time. I'm very curious.
Tony, just become saved, man. Stop fooling around.
The evidence is
how
undeniable.
condescending! How condescending!
I want you to be saved, Tony.
Yeah, I can dig it.
Tony, can I give you another piece of evidence that doesn't involve evolution? Have you ever heard of fulgurites?
No.
Okay, I'll explain to you. Fulgurites are the product of lightning when it hits the surface, say soil or rock or sand. It creates what's called a fulgurite, almost like a glass. Okay, if you read the literature, there are so many land strikes that you would in a 4, or let's say a 3 billion year old Earth, you would expect something around 7,500 fulgurites per square meter on the surface layer. Let's say if you distribute that over all the geological column, why is it we don't find any fulgurites in any of the layers apart from the surface layer? And we only find a very few, not the 7,500 per square meter. This is geology, mate. It is empirical evidence. It's got nothing to do with evolution. This is what we find, or we don't find. We don't find these fulgurites in the layers below the surface layer.
Hasn't lightning always been striking the Earth all those millions of years? We should find evidence of it.
And Tony, no one that I've spoken to knows the answer to that question. No one has given me an answer to that question. Furthermore, I heard the conversation previously. We had visitors here, unfortunately, and I couldn't join the conversation. But we were talking about folded rock layers. Now, I'm an engineer by profession, retired at this stage, but Neff correctly stated that you need at least 10 kilometres of overburden to create enough heat with tectonic motion to bend those layers. Now, if you'd say that it took, let's say, 10 or 100 million years for the tectonic movements to bring that layer to the surface, you would then have to assume that 10 kilometres of that overburden has been eroded. That's 10 kilometres of the surface layer. Explain to me, why do we still find fossils if 10 kilometres of this layer has been eroded?
The erosion rate, that kind of erosion rate, would be phenomenal.
It depends.
It can't happen, Tony. It can't happen. This is all empirical evidence.
On top of that, how does the mountain rise up out of the material if erosion removed 10 to 20 kilometers of overburden above it? How come it didn't also remove the mountain as it rose up out of the surface of the Earth? Why is there a mountain?
Wow.
Correct. The other empirical evidence, Tony, and this is secular. You can't say, oh, it's creationist, whatever. Secular scientists, geologists, going back to Professor James Galooly, estimated that at the rates that they actually determined through average rates, he actually calculated that would take 9.1 million years for the entire surface of Earth eroded down to sea level. That was verified later in the 60s and 70s by other geologists, and they determined 6 centimeters per 1,000 years should be eroding. The landform should be eroding every thousand years. Now, if you work that out, that's between 10 to 12 million years. We shouldn't have a landscape, right? 10 to 12 million years, we shouldn't have a landscape. If the Earth is 4.5 billion years, there should be nothing but ocean.
No.
That's secular empirical evidence.
Okay. Look. Look.
You notice I gave you nothing but empirical evidence, okay? Nothing but empirical evidence.
Go ahead, Nev.
Actually, what we should do is, since I made a lot of points there, Brother Neff did, and so did Brother George, maybe Tony, take as much time as you want,
Yeah.
uninterrupted, and just address, if you want to address my challenges to you on speciation rates and predictions, as well as the arguments that Brother Neff and George put forth. Take your time, Tony.
Okay, standing for truth, could you just concentrate it in one question? Give me a question.
Okay. You want the same question, or maybe a new question that I don't have to
If
take
it's the
so
same
long
question,
to explain?
I must admit I'm being. My mind is turning to mush at the moment. I'm sorry, but
No.
just
Okay. I'll give you a
get me
straightforward
on track,
question.
man.
I'll give you a straightforward question that deals with just humans. It deals with testable and falsifiable predictions. Let's look to, and then you can answer it, and you've probably heard of it. So, for example, when we look at, it's called pedigree-based mutation rate studies, okay? When we actually look at the empirically observed mutation rate in both the mitochondrial DNA and the Y chromosome, the mutation rates are faster than evolutionists ever expected. So when we do these analyses, the mutation rates only go back to 6,500 years to a mitochondrial Eve and 4,500 years to a Y chromosome Adam. You can see this in the secular literature and in pedigree-based technical papers found in Nature, for example. And Neff was showing a paper earlier from Nature. So we would predict, based on Genesis, that we should find this evidence since God created two people, Adam and Eve. So we all descend from just two ancestors, and that's exactly what we find in our genetics. So how would you respond to that then, Tony?
My response would be that you beg the question, that you need to prove God.
Oh,
Well, you asked me to make a prediction. So the book of Genesis tells us that God created two people, Adam and Eve, that we can make a number of predictions. For example, that would restrict genetic diversity. And lo and behold, we've discovered that humans in general have low genetic diversity. When the evolutionists discovered this, they were shocked. That's why they invented the out of Africa population bottleneck in order to reduce genetic diversity. There's another prediction. I just gave you three predictions based on genetic diversity, Y chromosome, mitochondrial DNA. So how would you respond to that, Tony?
This is the major problem of anything you got to say. You have to prove God. If you can't do that, anything you say after that is not admissible.
If we
Tony, let me talk to you about that for a second. Tony, you know, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 58 years old, and I've noticed, you know, as I've gotten older, you know, things don't work as well as they did when I was 35. I'm getting older, and we're all getting older, and we're all going to die. We're all going to die. And, you know, life is short. Man, it really is short. Seems like yesterday, you know. We all say that all the time.
Are you going to preach?
I am preaching a little bit. But, Tony, I want to ask you a question.
Neff,
I want to ask you, why don't you just stop fooling around and stop denying God and just owe up to him and say, okay, God, you know what? I've broken your law. I'm a sinner. Would you forgive me? Because, Tony, I just want to tell you, God is so eager to forgive your sins and give you eternal life.
Do you really want to know why? Or
He really is. Yeah, I do want to know why. I do want to know, but I just want to say this. God is not just willing to do it. He's eager to do it.
Do you want to know the answer to that question, or are you just going to preach?
Yeah, go ahead, tell us.
It's because I actually started reading the Bible.
You stopped reading the Bible?
No, I actually read the Bible.
Oh, I've heard that one so many times.
Oh, you've heard that one.
Yeah.
Then maybe it's a common thread.
I don't believe it.
Is with the well, what you believe is inconsequential.
No, I really don't believe anybody became an atheist by reading the Bible. I think reading the Bible will lead you toward becoming a Christian, if anything. Yeah.
It's like